You know the names, right? Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, Napoleon. Of course you do. But what if I told you there's a general who was undefeated, literally never lost a single battle, who took on two superpowers at once and won, and yet you've probably never heard of him? Well, today we're going to change that. We're talking about Khalid ibn al-Walid. I mean, listen to this. This isn't just my opinion. This comes from historian Dr. Roy Casagranda, who's the source for this whole explainer. He calls him one of the three greatest warriors of all time. That's not just a big statement, that is a huge statement. So it begs the question, right? Why isn't this guy a household name? Well, the answer, and it's a big one, has everything to do with where and when he lived. See, his story kicks off in the 7th century Middle East. And let's be honest, that's a time and a place that a lot of Western history books just skip over. It's like they jump straight from the fall of Rome to the Renaissance and label everything in between a dark age. But here's the thing, for a lot of the world, it wasn't dark at all. It was the dawn of something new. All right, so to really get Khalid, you gotta understand the world he was stepping into. It was a world totally dominated by these two ancient superpowers. These two colossal empires, and both of them were basically on life support. On one side, you've got the Eastern Roman Empire, and on the other, the Persian Empire. Think of them like two heavyweight boxers who've been slugging it out for centuries. They're both technologically advanced, they're both powerful, but they're also exhausted from constant war. Throw in some devastating plagues that wiped out huge chunks of their populations, and by the early 600s, both empires were just hollowed out. They were shadows of their former selves. And the scale of this fight, it's just mind-boggling. We're talking about the Roman-Persian Wars dragging on for almost 700 years. Can you even imagine that? A state of near constant war for that long? That means generations of people were born, lived, and died, knowing nothing else. By the time our story starts, they were just spent. And right into this power vacuum, this giant void, steps a brand new force, bursting out of the deserts of Arabia. And they're led by this military prodigy, Khalid ibn al-Walid. But here's the crazy part, the real twist in the story. He didn't start out as their hero. Nope, he started out as their enemy. I mean, look at his early resume. He's fighting for the city of Mecca, against the Prophet Muhammad and the early Muslims. He even beats them at the Battle of Uhud. But then, just a few years later, poof, he converts. He joins the very people he'd been trying to destroy. It's this incredible pivot that completely changes the course of history. And he doesn't waste any time proving his genius. Take the Battle of Mu'tah. The Muslim commanders are dead, the army is outnumbered, totally beaten, and they're in a full-blown retreat. It's a disaster. So Khalid takes command and does something brilliant. He has his men march in circles behind a hill and light a ton of extra campfires at night. The Romans see all this activity and think, whoa, a massive army of reinforcements just showed up. So they pause, they hesitate. And that little moment of hesitation is all Khalid needs to save his army from being completely wiped out. His very first command was turning a catastrophe into this legendary strategic escape. Incredible. But that amazing escape, that was just the warm-up act. This is where Khalid goes from being a really good commander to, well, an undisputed master of war. So after the Prophet's death, Khalid unifies the entire Arabian Peninsula for the first time ever, and he does it in less than a year. Okay, amazing. But then he does something that is just completely insane. He takes his small, relatively green army, and he attacks both the Persian and the Roman empires. At the same time, this should have been a suicide mission, no other way to put it. You can really see his genius on display against the Persians. He's facing 3 separate armies. Now, most generals would wait, try to pick them off. Not Khalid. He splits his own smaller army into 3 groups. Then they take 3 different routes through the pitch-black desert, navigating only by the stars. No maps, no GPS. And they all converge on the first Persian camp at the exact same moment. Boom, they obliterate it. And then they do it again to the second army, and then a third time. That's a logistical masterpiece that would be next to impossible to pull off even today. But his real masterpiece, the defining battle, was Yarmouk. And honestly, the numbers here just tell the whole story. The Romans had scraped together this enormous force to just wipe the Arab invasion off the map for good. And Khalid? He's outnumbered 3-1. Any other general on the planet would have turned and run. But Khalid, he saw an opportunity. So what was his plan? It was brilliant. He decided to turn the terrain itself into a weapon. He positioned his army between two massive, impassable ravines. It was like creating a natural funnel. This meant the Romans couldn't use their superior numbers to surround him, to flank him. He forced their giant army into this narrow corridor where he could control the fight. The battle raged for days, and at one point, the Roman attack was so fierce, so overwhelming, that the Muslim flanks actually broke and started to run. It looked like it was over, but then something absolutely incredible happened. The women back in the army camp, they saw their men retreating, so they grabbed their tent poles, formed a line, and literally charged their own husbands and brothers, shaming them, screaming at them to get back in the fight. And it worked. The line held, the army rallied, and Khalid seized the moment, eventually smashing the Roman forces. It was a decisive, world-changing victory. Okay, so Khalid's victory at Yarmouk didn't just break the Roman army. It opened the road to one of the holiest cities on earth, Jerusalem. And what happened next, the way the city was taken, was just as remarkable as the battle that made it possible. While Khalid was securing the area, the leader of Jerusalem said he would only surrender the city to the caliph himself. So the caliph, Omar, travels all the way from Arabia, but he doesn't show up like a conqueror on a magnificent war horse. He arrives walking, while his servant gets a turn riding their shared camel. He's wearing these simple, patched-up robes. The Archbishop of Jerusalem is just stunned, and Omar's response is perfect. He just says, "I'm a humble man with humble needs." And that humility, that philosophy, it carried right over into the surrender terms. I mean, you have to remember, this was an age of brutal conquest. Usually a city would be sacked, looted, the people enslaved. But the terms offered here were just unheard of. No plundering, no enslaving, no seizing of private property. It was a political statement that was just as disciplined as Khalid's army was on the battlefield. And then there's this incredible moment. Omar is invited to pray in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is basically the holiest site in all of Christianity. And he says no, he refuses. And his reason shows just incredible foresight. He explains that if he prays there, his followers in the future will use it as an excuse to claim the site and turn it into a mosque. By praying somewhere else, he guaranteed that the church would remain a Christian holy site, a really profound act. After that, he asks to see the Temple Mount, a site sacred to Jews, and he finds that it's been completely desecrated, literally used as a city garbage dump. He's horrified. He actually falls to his knees and starts clearing away the trash with his own hands. This single act of restoration, coming right after a military conquest, was this powerful symbol of a new order. And for the first time in centuries, Jewish families were invited to come back and live in the city. So what about our hero, Khalid? After all these incredible victories paving the way for this whole new era, you'd expect him to get a hero's parade, right? A triumphant end to a legendary career. But, history's rarely that clean. In a really strange, ironic twist of politics, Caliph Omar, the same humble guy, and Khalid's own cousin, starts to get nervous about Khalid's fame. He's worried that the people are starting to believe the victories are because of Khalid, the man, and not because of God. And so, at the absolute peak of his success, the undefeated sword of God is just dismissed. He's fired. Khalid ibn al-Walid, the man who lived and breathed battle, never fought again. He died peacefully in his bed years later. And his final words, they're just filled with this tragic warrior's irony. He said, "Here I am, dying in a bed like a cow. I am covered in scars. It was my dream that God would let me die as a man on the field of battle." He wanted a warrior's death, and he was denied it. So that brings us right back to where we started. Why don't we know this story? Is it what Dr. Casagrande calls a proximity bias? Do we just naturally value the history that feels closest to us, geographically and culturally? The story of Khalid ibn al-Walid really makes you wonder, what other giants of history have we left standing in the shadows, just waiting for us to find them?